We're going balls deep into PlayStation 6 rumors and how Sony has basically kind of already confirmed the 2027 release date. We're also going to talk about the possibility of a new DualSense with a screen. Ex-Sony boss reveals all in a new interview, the state of the gaming industry, and ballooning budgets that are getting out of control. So get comfortable, click that like button, put your tinfoil hat on, and let's see how pissed the haters will get today. Alright, let's talk about Shuhei Yoshida, one of the OGs of PlayStation. This guy's been with Sony since before the whole PlayStation brand even existed. From 2008 to 2019, he was the president of Sony Interactive Entertainment Worldwide Studios, and honestly, he played a massive role in making PlayStation what it is today. Now here's the thing, remasters and remakes. It feels like every other month there's another announcement. Like, I get it, sometimes it's cool to revisit old classics, but do we really need a remaster of everything? Games like Until Dawn or The Last of Us come to mind, and it's like, did we really need this again? But here's where it gets interesting. In an interview with Greg Miller on Kinda Funny, Yoshida explained that these remasters and remakes actually have a pretty important purpose. They're not just cash grabs, well, not entirely. He said they're basically a necessary way to make money, which then allows studios to fund new and original games. So yeah, they might seem like fillers sometimes, but they're actually helping studios take risks on fresh ideas. Yoshida even joked about Herman Hulse and how people complain that Sony is putting out too many remasters. But Yoshida was quick to clarify that most of the time, these remakes are handled by separate teams, sometimes porting teams, especially for PC versions. So it's not like the main dev teams are being pulled away from making new stuff just to churn out remasters. And let's not ignore the financial side of it. Yoshida straight up said that single-player games are getting crazy expensive to make. Like, the costs are so high that studios need extra revenue streams, and remasters are a cheaper way to make that happen. Plus, bringing games to PC not only makes more money, but also introduces new players to these franchises. It's a win-win for Sony. The only real downside, if the remaster itself isn't polished. But when done right, they're low-risk, high-reward projects. So yeah, while remasters might not always seem necessary, they're helping keep the gaming ecosystem alive and thriving. And honestly, if that means we get more ambitious new games in the future, maybe it's worth it. What do you think? Are remasters overkill, or do they make sense in the big picture? He also talked about PSVR2. He straight up admitted it didn't hit the heights they were hoping for. Like, it's no PS2, not even close. So when the PSVR2 came out in February 2023, there was this buzz, right? Like, oh, maybe VR is finally gonna be the thing. People were hyped it could break out of that little corner of gaming where it's cool but not like mainstream. But now, almost 2 years later, it hasn't really caught fire. In the first few months, the sales were, let's just say meh. A few 100,000 units sold compared to the OG PSVR, which hit 1 million in the same time. That's a pretty big gap. And yeah, they had some solid games, like Resident Evil 4 and Horizon, Call of the Mountain. Those were great showcases for the tech, but even then, they didn't keep the hype going. It's like they lit the match but couldn't keep the flame alive. So fast forward to late 2024, and Yoshida pops up on the Kinda Funny Gamescast. They ask him about the PSVR2, and he laughs like, yeah, my bad, it didn't turn into the PS2. When Greg Miller pushed him a bit, asking what went wrong, Yoshida basically dodged with a, let's move on. That kind of says it all, doesn't it? The issues seem pretty clear. The price? It's up there. The launch library? And let's be real, VR still feels like it's for a specific crowd. It hasn't broken out into everyone's gotta have this territory. But you know, it's not all doom and gloom. By the end of 2024, they added some new games like Trombone Champ Unflattened and Alien Rogue Incursion, which gave it a bit more variety. And in 2025, they've got Hitman World of Assassination coming to VR in March. That could bring some excitement back, who knows? The bottom line, the PSVR2 wasn't the massive hit Sony probably wanted, but it's not dead in the water either. If they drop the price and get more, oh my god, you have to play this games, it could still find its place. Will it be the next PlayStation 2? Nah, that ship's sailed. But maybe it can carve out a nice little spot for itself in gaming history. Lastly, I want to talk about game budgets. New Activision leaks show that we are reaching the $1 billion mark. It's insane, guys. Let's get into it. Blockbuster game budgets are ballooning to near $1 billion levels, and the fallout is rippling through the entire ecosystem. Let's talk about why this trend is a disaster for gaming as a whole, and why it's a cautionary tale for developers, publishers, and players alike. New data from GameFile reveals that Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War cost a staggering $700 million to develop, and that's just scratching the surface. Some studios are reportedly facing combined costs, including marketing, north of $1 billion. That's right, $1 billion for a single game. This is why $70 games don't feel like they're worth $70 anymore. It's why in-game shops ops and microtransactions have become so aggressive. Studios aren't just trying to make a profit, they're desperately clawing to recoup these astronomical investments. If you've ever wondered why games are flooded with low-effort cosmetic items, or why live service titles collapse under their own weight, this is it. This obsession with outspending the competition is suffocating creativity and driving studios into unsustainable practices. Patrick Kelly, head of Call of Duty, recently shared some eye-popping numbers. Black Ops 3 cost $450 million and sold 45 million copies. Modern Warfare hit $640 million in costs and sold 41 million copies. And Black Ops Cold War, it pushed costs to $700 million but sold fewer copies, just 30 million. Despite the rising costs, Call of Duty remains a money printer, thanks to massive sales and aggressive monetization strategies. Modern Warfare 2, for instance, hit $1 billion in sales in just 10 days. But here's the thing, what works for Call of Duty doesn't work for everyone else. The success of these mega games sets an impossible standard. Publishers, desperate to mimic this model, pour absurd amounts of money into their own games, only to fail spectacularly. Think Medal of Honor, Battlefield, and even Dragon Age 4, which was initially conceived as a live service game, a bafflingly bad idea for a franchise rooted in single-player storytelling. It's why studios shut down after just one bad release. Even giants like Square Enix are struggling. Final Fantasy XVI and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth both fell short of expectations, despite their massive budgets, and the Insomniac team behind Spider-Man 2 made it painfully clear these budgets are getting out of hand. The first Spider-Man game cost $100 million to make. The sequel, $300 million. While Spider-Man 2 will likely turn a profit, the sheer scale of investment raises a brutal question. Is this sustainable for anyone outside the biggest players? Thankfully, not everyone is following the herd. Remedy Entertainment, the studio behind Alan Wake 2 and Control, is proving that there's another way. They're focusing on manageable budgets. Alan Wake 2 cost just 53.5 million euros to develop, and creating games designed to be sustainable and profitable over time. This approach isn't just good for Remedy, it's good for the industry. It shows that you don't need a blank check to create compelling, visually stunning games. By keeping their costs in check, Remedy can take creative risks without betting the entire company. Let's talk about the new PS6 rumors that just dropped. Basically, this confirms what I always said. The PlayStation 6 is coming in 2027. Alright, so the main stuff here comes from this leaker, Kepler L2. You might have heard of him. He's the guy who nailed the specs for the PS5 Pro before anyone else. Like, he even talked about how the PS5 Pro would include RDNA 4 features for ray tracing, and that was basically confirmed later. So yeah, he's pretty legit. Now he's saying the PS6 design is done. It's in this stage called pre-silicon validation. Don't worry, I'll explain what that means. Pre-silicon validation is basically when they test the chip design super hard before they actually manufacture it. Kepler also mentioned something called AO tape-out, which is when they physically make the first chip. That's apparently happening late this year. If that timeline holds, we're looking at a release window for the PS6 around 2027. Sony usually takes about 2 years from AO tape-out to console launch. So yeah, 2027 checks out. Now, someone online, probably one of those tech nerds, was worried that Sony might use older tech like N3, which wouldn't be a huge jump from what we have now. But Kepler chimed in and said, nope, some of it could be on N2 tech, which is better. He even dropped Zen 6 into the mix. If you're not familiar, Zen 6 is AMD's upcoming CPU tech, and it's miles ahead of what we've got now. The PS5 and PS5 Pro are running Zen 2 CPUs, which came out back in 2019. If Zen 6 lands in 2026, like the rumors say, the PS6 could launch with that. It would be a massive jump in CPU performance. As for the GPU, Kepler said it's an early fork of AMD's new unified structure, which people online are calling RDNA 5. This is the same tech AMD announced last year, and it's rumored to launch in 2026. Oh, and there's this other feature called 3DV cache, which is basically a fancy way of saying the CPU can access info way faster. It stacks more memory on the chip without making it bigger. What does that mean for you? Faster performance and smoother gameplay. If you're wondering about the timeline, let's look at history. The PS4 came out in 2013, and the PS5 launched 7 years later in 2020. If Sony sticks to that cycle, the PS6 should drop in 2027. Makes sense, right? And Sony already said the PS5 Pro's launch wouldn't mess with the PS6 timeline. Plus, even when the PS6 comes out, Sony won't just abandon the PS5. I mean, the PS4 is still getting support, and the PS3 somehow still has servers up. Cross-gen support will definitely be around for a while. So yeah, the PS6 leaks are here, and it's looking like holiday 2027 could be the big moment. It's not confirmed yet, but all the pieces are lining lining up. Are you on board with a 2027 launch, or do you think it's too soon? Now, I want to talk about something I'd love to see in PlayStation 6. You know, Sony has always been about innovation and pushing new tech, right? So why not give us a DualSense with a small screen instead of a touchpad? Sounds exciting, right? Let's explore how this could shape gaming and talk about the obstacles that might stand in its way. Think about the boost in immersion. Imagine playing an intense RPG where your inventory pops up on your controller's screen. You could swap weapons or potions on the fly without cluttering the main TV display. Or, in a racing game, maybe your lap times and minimap appear right there, so you never have to take your eyes off the action. Another exciting possibility? Improved accessibility. A second screen could allow for custom controls, on-the-spot tutorials, or even on-screen text prompt to guide you through tricky levels. But let's be real, packing extra hardware into a controller is a monumental task. First off, battery life is the biggest concern. We already worry about how long controllers last before needing a recharge. Add a screen into the mix, and you're going to need better batteries or more frequent charging. Neither is ideal. Then there's the cost. Developing and manufacturing controllers with built-in screens will likely bump up the price. Think about whether players will be okay spending significantly more for that extra display. And don't forget about weight and ergonomics. A screen plus its supporting tech could make the controller feel bulky. Would that ruin the comfortable grip DualSense is known for? On top of that, developers would need to create special features that utilize the second screen in creative ways. If too many games skip it, owners would be left with a fancy gimmick that doesn't get much use. Also, hardware reliability is key. Cram more components in, and there's a greater chance something could fail. Nobody wants to replace an expensive controller for minor screen issues. With all that being said, I would love that DualSense controller, and I'd keep it plugged in at all times if I had to. But what about you? If you want to be ahead of all the gaming leaks and news, specifically PlayStation news, time for you to subscribe. And as always, a like on the video is very much appreciated.